Welcome to Stand and Deliver, the most complete, powerful, and practical audio program ever created on the art and science of public speaking. Today, the Dale Carnegie Organization is the world's leading resource for public speaking mastery, and this has been true for almost a century. Just as certainly, the Nightingale Conant Corporation is the world leader in audio learning technology. Now, Dale Carnegie and Nightingale Conant are proud to bring you this definitive program on speaking in public. So, whether you're just starting out or if you already have extensive experience with oral presentations, Stand and Deliver will take you to the next level of mastery. So, let's get started. Literally, since the dawn of civilization, the ability to speak well in front of others has been an ongoing human challenge. This was especially true for the classical civilizations of Greece and Rome. But public speaking ability was also highly esteemed in biblical times, and by Native American tribes, and by the cultures of India and China. Fascinating as it might be, however, our purpose here is not a history lesson. So right at the outset, we're going to introduce 3 key tools for creating a high-impact presentation. These are timeless principles upon which all great speakers have relied, though each has done so in his or her own way. By blending your unique identity with the universal principles we're about to discuss, you can transform yourself into an effective public speaker almost instantly. So please listen closely. What you're about to learn will have a dramatic effect, not only on how you communicate to others, but on how you see yourself as well. The fact is, human beings are talking beings. We start talking when we wake up in the morning and we keep at it until we go to sleep, and some people don't even stop then. But in order to be an effective presenter, you need to understand the major difference between ordinary talking and speaking in public. You need to master certain key skills that create the illusion that your presentation is as personal as a one-on-one conversation. But that illusion is only possible when you've professionalized yourself as a speaker. David Letterman has the ability to speak with virtually anybody, while 10 million viewers are looking in. Yet he's able to make this seem as casual as a break at the office water cooler. Now, you may not think of David Letterman as a great public speaker, but he draws on the same principles that virtually every accomplished speaker has used since ancient times. What are these principles? The first one is actually quite obvious, and maybe that's why so many speakers seem to forget it. It can be stated in a single, very short sentence. Know what you're talking about. Learn the material so well that you own it. Don't just have some expertise in your topic, master it. Be able to fill every second of your presentation with solid content. Once you're able to do that, 90% of your work will be done before you even get up in front of the audience. To make this point, Dale Carnegie liked to invoke the example of Luther Burbank, a great scientist by any measure and probably the greatest botanist of all time. Burbank once said, "I have often produced 1,000,000 plants in order to find 1 or 2 really good ones, and then I destroyed all the inferior specimens." A presentation ought to be prepared in that same lavish and discriminating spirit. Assemble 100 thoughts and discard 90 or even 99. Collect more material, more information than there is any possibility of employing. Gather it for the additional confidence it will give you and for the sureness of touch. Gather it for the effect it will have on your mind and heart and whole manner of speaking. This is a basic factor in preparation, yet speakers constantly ignore it. Mr. Carnegie actually believed that speakers should know 40 times more about their topic than they share in a presentation. When speakers, especially inexperienced speakers, begin to prepare a talk, their biggest fear is not having enough to say to fill the allotted time. Most people worry that they'll run out of material in the middle of their talk, but they respond to this fear in a misguided way. They puff their presentation. They wind up trying to cram the story of their lives into their 15 minutes at the podium. The presentation gets bigger, but instead of really growing, it just swells. This is an especially dangerous pitfall for new speakers, since it's usually an unconscious process. The principle of knowing what you're talking about doesn't mean you have to say it all. You say just enough to fill your time effectively. You leave your audience wanting more. And if you've truly mastered your subject, they'll know that there is more. You'll project knowledge to them that's above and beyond your actual spoken words. To reach this level of mastery, you should begin preparing 10 days to 2 weeks before the event. Start your preparation by sitting down with a pencil and paper for 20 minutes, no less and no more, and writing at least 50 questions about your topic. 50 is the minimum, but you should definitely try for as many as possible. Write your questions as quickly as you can. Don't give them a lot of thought at this point. That's why the 20-minute time limit is important. This stage of preparation is a sprint, not a leisurely stroll through your mental library. During the first 20-minute session, what you're really doing is creating an outline for your talk, and I want to stress the importance of putting this in the form of questions. Research shows that this is much more stimulating to the brain than a conventional outline, and since you're not supplying answers at this point, it can also be done much faster. The answers will come later in other sessions leading up to your talk. Let me repeat. Your first session should be limited to 20 minutes, and it should be done the old-fashioned way with an actual pencil and paper. Now in your second session, you'll start supplying answers to your questions and providing evidence for your ideas. This is when the computer becomes an essential tool. Begin by creating a document file of your questions. There should be at least 50, and quickly writing an answer for each one based on your own knowledge. Write this just as you would say it if you were sitting in Starbucks with a good friend. Unlike your first session, you don't have to limit yourself to 20 minutes, but don't feel as if you have to answer all of your questions either. Just keep at it until you feel your energy start to fade. And resist the temptation to use the internet to gather information. That will come later. Right now, your job is to access everything you know about your topic, which is probably a lot more than you think you know. It may take you several sessions to answer all the questions you wrote down, but that's no problem as long as you begin at least 10 days in advance. Just make sure that you complete your answers with 3 or 4 days left before the date of your talk. In those final sessions, you can surf the internet for facts and figures to enhance what you've already written. And remember this, you don't have to report everything there is to know about your topic. Ideally, you have total mastery of your subject, but that's for your benefit as much as for the audience. Mastery allows you to feel completely confident in your role as an authority. It's not something you have to demonstrate in the actual words that come out of your mouth. So pick and choose the really pertinent and hard-hitting information that you want to include. Think of your talk as a special meal you're preparing in your home for some honored guests. Don't think of it as a full-service restaurant. Sometimes there will be presentations for which you have little or no prior information. Other times the opposite will be true. For example, if you're talking about your own life or career, you'll already have a wealth of material on the subject. Your problem then is to select and arrange the information. Don't try to tell your audience everything, because it can't be done. Your talk will come off as sketchy and fragmented. On the other hand, if you're talking about something that's less familiar to you, avoid trying to cover this up with excessive research. Just be frank with yourself and your audience about your relationship to the topic. You don't have to say you feel inadequate about it, but you don't have to pretend you're a total expert either. You might want to take only one phase of your topic and enlarge upon it. Don't make your talk an abstraction. Make liberal use of illustrations, personal observations, and self-revelations. Think of specific situations you've observed, and let those situations reveal any general principles. Above all else, your goal should always be to share your authentic point of view with the audience. That may be from the viewpoint of an excited and highly motivated learner, or from an experienced and completely genuine, reliable, and empathic teacher. By showing this is who you really are, you'll capture the goodwill of your listeners. So far, we've talked about creating the content of your talk. Now you're probably wondering how you should organize it to fit the time frame you've been allotted. You're wondering how to configure all that information into a coherent presentation. And if you're like most people, you're especially concerned about making sure you don't suddenly freeze up when you stand behind the microphone. Shouldn't you memorize all or part of what you're going to say? Shouldn't you at least write it out? Let me respond to those last two questions. No, you should definitely not memorize all or part of your talk. And no, you should not even write it out. If you do, the chances are your presentation will sound like you're reading rather than speaking. Later in the program, we discuss organizational templates for talks of various lengths. Those will be valuable tools, but the technique we're going to look at now is something very different. It's the technique of rehearsal. Rehearsing your presentation should happen in two ways, and the first one takes place entirely inside your own head. At the same time as your written preparation is continuing, you should be constantly revisiting, revising, and rehearsing your talk in your mind. That means you're going to be thinking and rethinking your topic for at least 10 days. Think of it when you first wake up in the morning. Think of it some more just before bed. Go over it in your mind while you're eating breakfast. Go over it again if you have a commute to your work. See what new ideas you can come up with, or what old ideas don't seem to be working anymore. All this can be done entirely on your own. Think about your listeners and their expectations. Think also about your expectations of yourself. What are your goals in this presentation? Do you want to inform, inspire, entertain, persuade, or all of the above? Think about the physical setting in which your talk will take place. How big will the room be? How many people will it hold? And how many will actually be present? How much influence can you have on these practical details? For example, it's best not to have a small group of people in a large room, so give some thought to these physical details. Focusing on these issues beforehand will help ensure that your presentation achieves its purpose. In your own mind, clearly identify your subject and your purpose to yourself, and then let the creative process take over. As this process unfolds, you can begin speaking your presentation aloud. The car is an ideal place to do this, but you can also try it at home while looking in a mirror. Get a feel for the timing of your words and sentences. Amend them and refine them, both for their content and for the time that they take. If you're an inexperienced speaker, estimating the time of a presentation can be deceptive. Despite the very common fear of running out of things to say, most people actually have more material than they think. This is better than having too little, but it can also throw off your timing. Presentations almost always take longer to deliver than you think the material will last. But all of this is only one kind of rehearsal. So far, we've been talking about rehearsing by yourself, but you should also be practicing your talk with your friends. You can ask a friend to listen to an actual run-through of your presentation, or you can just brainstorm about your topic. But make this your main topic of conversation as often as you can. Pay close attention to how people react to different phrases and ideas. As you do these live rehearsals, you'll see that a structure begins to evolve. Ideally, this is an organic process, but you'll also want to consciously organize your talk in line with the templates you'll be learning later in the program. In general, keep in mind what experienced speakers call the rule of 3. A simple application of this would mean giving your talk in 3 main sections. Then each section also has 3 subsections. Depending on your time limits, each of these could then have 3 sections and so on. There's something about the 3-part formula that creates a natural flow, and you'll want to take full advantage of that. Your rehearsals will show how important it is to have a strong opening and a strong close. As you'll learn later in the program, there are many tools for getting off to a fast start. But as a general rule, you must tell people what you're going to speak about and what your purpose is. They need to feel that the talk is important to you, and they certainly need to feel it's important to them. That's your first order of business. And at the close, using a stirring quotation or an amazing statistic is always a good choice. Give your listeners something to think about and talk about at the end. Try out different closes in your rehearsals and ask for honest feedback about the effects. Fundamentally, the famous quote holds true. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. When you have structured your presentation along those lines, it will have an opening, middle, and a close. But you're not finished yet. Far from it. We've talked about creating content, and we've begun to explore ways of structuring your presentation. Now we're going to look at delivery. Content and organization are very important, but as Dale Carnegie liked to say, depth of conviction counts more than height of logic, and enthusiasm is worth more than knowledge. If you've ever attended a college debate competition, or even if you've ever listened to an argument between two teenagers, you probably noticed one key point. By no means is it always the person with the facts and figures who emerges as the winner. Rather, it's the person who sounds best. It's the person who presents an argument so well that it seems like it must be correct, even if that isn't necessarily the case. So let's give this issue of delivery some serious attention. If you've never spoken in public before, let me give you a hint about a very strong feeling you're likely to have when you try it for the first time. And if you're already an experienced speaker, I hope you'll still pay close attention to what I'm about to say, because I'm sure you'll see the truth of it. You see, the first time you make a public presentation, you'll be using the English language, just like you always do. You'll be using the same words and phrases, but you'll be talking rather than speaking in a professional sense. You'll be communicating information, but you won't be delivering it in a meaningful and powerful way. Dale Carnegie once described a very clear example of this. He was staying at a hotel in England that brought in weekly speakers for the entertainment and education of the guests. One of these speakers turned out to be a well-known British writer, and her topic was the future of the novel. While there was no doubt that she was an excellent writer, it quickly became clear that speaking was not her strong point. She admitted right off that she had not selected the topic herself, and in fact there was nothing about it that she really cared to say. What she'd done was to make some rambling notes. With the notes in her hand, she stood in front of the audience, literally ignoring them, not even looking at them, sometimes staring over their heads, sometimes at her notes, and sometimes at the floor. She called out her words into some primeval void, with a faraway look in her eyes and a faraway ring in her voice. As Dale Carnegie quickly saw, that wasn't a presentation at all. It was a monologue. There was no sense of connection with the listeners, and connection is the essence of effective public speaking. The audience must feel that there is a message being delivered straight from the mind and heart of the speaker to their own minds and their own hearts. So how exactly does that happen? There is a whole category of literature known as oratory or rhetoric, but most of it is useless for our purposes today. Old-fashioned oratory in which the speaker set off all kinds of verbal fireworks just won't work in a contemporary setting. The modern audience, whether it's 15 people in a conference room or 1,000 people in an arena or millions watching their televisions, they want speakers to talk directly and personally. They want a public presentation to have the same intimacy as a private chat. But that's not all they want. Paradoxically, they also expect this intimate exchange to be delivered with considerable force, and that's a tall order. Somehow you have to do something that's quite unnatural, and yet make it seem like the most natural thing in the world. There are programs that will tell you that this is all a matter of getting in touch with your deepest emotions and your strongest feelings. While it's certainly important to care for what you're talking about, the real secret to outstanding delivery is more about the mind than the heart. Creating connection with your listeners is a rational rather than an emotional process. It may seem emotional, and in fact it definitely should, but like any form of magic, what you see is only a fraction of what's really going on. This has always been true of any art form. Masterpieces like Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa or Michelangelo's David appear to be living beings, but they are actually based on a mathematical understanding of human form and proportion. Even stand-up comedy depends on setting up certain rhythms that are as predictable as the chiming of a clock. With this in mind, you can learn a great deal about effective public speaking by adopting a scientifically analytical viewpoint. Once you are confidently in control of this perspective, you'll find that the emotions will take care of themselves. A first principle of high-impact delivery is your conscious choice of which words to emphasize. Believe it or not, the meaning of any English sentence is based on the stress placed on the words, much more so than on the dictionary definition. It's easy to prove this. Just pick any sentence and repeat it several times, each time emphasizing different words. As you can see, the meaning entirely changes. What's more, some versions of the sentence are much more compelling and interesting than others. You can put this rule to work in a presentation. I'm going to read a sentence without giving any of the words extra stress. I have succeeded in whatever I have started because I have willed it. I never hesitated, which has given me an advantage over the rest of mankind. That was uniform stress, because none of the words were emphasized. The passions and viewpoint of the speaker weren't really communicated. Now, I'll read it again, this time emphasizing key words. I have succeeded in whatever I have undertaken because I have willed it. I have never hesitated, which has given me an advantage over the rest of mankind. Notice, for example, how stressing the word never brings drama to the sentence. The emphasis on never hesitating actually suggests that there has in fact been a struggle against hesitation. It even implies that that struggle is still going on. If it weren't, why would there be such energy placed on the word never?